Good afternoon, everyone. Today we are going to get started with a workshop called Micro Frontends with Module Federation. So, yeah, I am Nischit Shetty, and I'm currently a SD3 at GeekyAnts, and it's been more than a year since the journey. Uh, I am a full stack developer. I primarily work on the front end with technologies like React, TypeScript, React Redux, and so on. I like to unbox code as well as technologies. And this is a little bit about me. There is this image that we have right now. Okay, this is analogous to the topic that we are going to cover today. Uh, this image that we have right now is of Da Vinci's aerial screw, or we can also call it as an old helicopter model. So the story behind this image is that when Da Vinci had started to initially develop this project called, he wanted to make a helicopter at that point of time, and he had designed this image using all his calculations, but he wasn't able to do so at that point of time due to unavailability of materials or a proper architecture and so on. So what happened was, after a certain period of time, when people had enough materials to create the same, they went ahead and created it, and they came to know, okay, that this is possible. So similar to this, we have an architectural revolution that took place in our web design system. So initially, we had something called monolith. So monolith, what happens is that each and everything is created by a single team. There is no separate front end and back end. Everything that is related to the software is developed by a single team without separation of roles for based on the technologies. As in, there isn't a separate team that is assigned to UI and a separate team assigned to all the backend. After that, we started segregating based on the responsibilities. So there was a front end team that came up and also a back end team along with it. Uh, Soon the evolution went forward and we got something called microservices. So microservices, basically they aligned each and every teams in the backend based on the operation that we're doing. So if someone was creating uh, something related to recharge, then they would be assigned to a single team. And if, let's say, someone wants to create something related to booking, then they had a separate team, and so on. So this basically happened in the backend, and then we have something called micro frontends as of now, wherein each and every team would be segregated based on the operation that you're doing. So the relation between this image that we have right now and the one that we saw previously of Da Vinci's aerial image was that we had the plan for it, that okay, we need to have some sort of a segregation on the front end as well, but we didn't have a proper framework which allowed us to do so. So we were stuck on being monolith on the front end, but introduction of certain framework enabled us to create the micro front ends on the front end, and that's all on the architecture evolution. uh, so what is basically a micro front end? Okay, so let's say I'll consider an example of a flight management app. We have four different applications or four different business use case over here. One of them being the booking, the check-in, the luggage, and the boarding. Okay. The booking app would be, if we consider all of these and we have created a single application with as a monolith, then what happens is that if a developer or if there is a certain upgrade that came in with the check-in app, and maybe certain regulations came in and we had to modify the check-in app, then the whole app, since it's dependent on the whole app, will have to go through each and every code and see if there are any dependencies that might cause issues in maybe the luggage app or maybe in the booking app and so on. So first of all, this would increase a lot of development time. Okay, since we are checking dependencies and we are checking for issues on the other phase. The second thing that comes up is that this would also create a huge learning curve if a new developer comes in. So he not only has to check in the check-in app, he also has to look for maybe the booking app, the luggage app, and the boarding app as well. So that's why it was separated into four different micro frontends, and then it would be integrated in a single application. The booking app now would be separate. It would be built and deployed separately. Okay, so this drastically changes on how the application is being developed. There will be a shorter learning curve as well, because the developer now has to only look at one application and he has to understand the mechanics of just one app. And this would also help in the building time as well. So it would, since we would only be building the booking app, then and deploying it, it would lessen the build time as well over here. So this is an example of how micro frontends are separately created and deployed. So now, since we have a brief idea on what is a micro frontend, the very next question comes in. Okay, what is model federation? So model federation basically, as per the Webpack documentation, what it says is that it helps us to multiple separate builds should form a single application. Now, these separate builds should not have dependencies between each other so that they can be developed and deployed individually. So yeah, Module Federation is basically a plugin in Webpack which helps us to create uh, which helps basically to enable the micro frontend. So let's say, for example, if, as we saw in the previous case, if there is a booking app that is being developed, it can be deployed and developed individually. Okay, so this would help us to gain a traction without causing a lot of development time. And other than that, it also helps us to create an ownership on each and every micro frontend, and this also helps us to gain traction on the build time as well. So since we now have an idea on both what is micro frontend and module federation, what is basically the prerequisite for these cases? Like if I wanted to develop a micro frontend based on module federation, what would be the prerequisites? The very first thing being, we'll need something called a host app. A host app is something, or a shell app, it is referred as. It will host multiple micro frontends. So there will be certain remote. The second being the remote app is in the one pluggable app which would be added into the host app. So we can create multiple remote apps and then plug into a host application and then keep on developing the same. So if we consider our example, that host application would be the flight management app, the main interface, and then we can add the booking app, the checking app, the luggage app, and so on to plug to our host application. The third is the framework. So since we are referring to module federation over here, we'll be using the Webpack framework to enable micro frontend. So let's have a short demo on how Webpack enables micro frontend in our application. Uh, so in our example over here, what we have is a host application. So the very basic prerequisite being the Webpack will have this configuration that is shown over here. So we'll have a basic boilerplate code for Webpack, which would help us enable uh, micro frontend. So I'll create a simple, let's say I'll have two applications over here. One of them being the host app, the second being the remote application. This is with boilerplate for the Webpack. So I'll have the entry, the mode of we have set it as development, the dev server, and so on. We have something called plugins in Webpack, which help us to enable to add certain features to our application. So over here, I have created a new module federation plugin, and I have named it as host. Uh, the remotes basically help us to get, okay, what is the remote application that we need to add over here. So I have added two remote applications over here, the localhost 4000 as well as it is on localhost 4001. So these are the two remote applications that we have as of now. The shared. So one feature that module federation brings us is that we can share dependencies. So if you have an application, if you have multiple applications that are based on React or Reactome, what we can do over here is that instead of React being added in each of them as a separate dependency, we can share these dependencies with each other, thus reducing the bundle size of the application as well. The very next thing that we have over here is HTML Webpack plugin. So this is something that we need for Webpack to help us bundle all the data that we have together. Yeah. Uh, this is a configuration for the host app, and let's now jump into the remote application over here. We have something similar over here. The Webpack, we have the module.exports and so on. We have also added the module federation plugin over here. But the one difference that we see over here is that we will have exposes over here. So exposes basically it exposes the component that is available for the other remotes to be able to access it. So I have added the app over here uh, to be able to access for the other applications to access. So this app over here, this app component over here would be able to will be able the others would be able to access the same as well. I have named it as remote 2 over here. Now I'll try to run this application that we have over here in localhost. So the host application, it is hosted on localhost 3000. Our other apps are not running right now. So that's why what we get is that, okay, our host application is running, but the other apps are not. So we'll try to run them again. So we'll have run our application once again. Now, let us check if our application remote 2 is running. Okay. So we have finally got remote 2. So, okay. So our remote 2 is now being run over here. And we also have something called remote 2 enabled over here as well. So this has been plugged in our main application, which is a host app as well. Okay. Now, if I try to run localhost once again over here, so there are two module entry.js files that are enabled over here. So main.js file is the application that is our main application. The module.entry.js file is our remote application or the micro frontend that we are using over here. This is the second micro frontend that we have. So one of the main thing that we can see over here is that it is size 63.6 KB, but yeah. So these two files, okay, basically if we consider the file that has been loaded, it would be much more shorter than what we have as a single application, because this would be using the same dependency that we have over here in main.js. So React and React DOM would not be again loaded in our micro frontend. So in a way, this also helps us to reduce our bundle time. And yeah, so as a reference, we'll be creating a separate, so we can refer the remote one over here. Yeah. So what we have added over here is that we have also added a button.js. So let's say if you have a separate micro frontend which has which we can create as a separate design system, and we can add the components over there. So this components would be in a separate app. We can add versioning over there, and anytime there is, let's say, a change in the application, or uh, if we want to create separate applications without disturbing the versions, then we can create it as a micro frontend, uh, so that it can so that we can use any other components that are available without any issues. And that was a short demo of micro frontend. So yeah, since we already know what is micro frontend or module federation, there are certain things that we consider. Yeah. So since you already know what is micro frontend and module federation, there are certain things that we need to keep in mind before we consider the same. One of them being if we are migrating to a diverse tech stack. Okay. So let's say if we have an example, that is, my team has decided that okay, we are currently using version 10.1, but we'll be migrating to maybe the latest version, which is 17. Since this is such a huge jump in the migration, it might cause a lot of issues in our application. So we can create separate micro frontends. So our micro frontend 1 and 2, those would be using 10.1, but we can add directly 17.1 17 on our other micro frontends, and we can check and we can migrate all of them step by step without causing a huge issue. And that is one of the use cases where we can consider micro frontend. The other being diverse tech stack. We can also create one micro frontend in React, the other in Vue, and other frameworks and so on, without without causing a huge issues. The second thing is creating highly scalable application. So let's say, for example, if I'm creating an application that has a lot of business use cases. So for example, if it's a flight management app, as I'm considering, I can create the booking as a separate one. I can create a team that would solely focus on the business use case of booking. It can add advertising and so on in the booking front end. The other check-in and so on would have their own ownership, and they can scale according to their needs. So this is also a use case where we can consider micro front end. And that was all from my side.